Thank you for being here tonight. We're going to start off in northern Iraq. The unexpected success of the Islamic State in northern Iraq this summer has focused international attention on Iraqi Kurdistan, a cluster of 3 provinces under the control of the Kurdistan Regional Government, the KRG. The early victories that IS achieved over the Kurdish Defense Forces, known as the Peshmerga, partly contributed to the US decision to send military advisors to Iraq, as well as to begin airstrikes to slow IS's advance. These developments have brought cities like Erbil, Kirkuk, and Duhok back into the headlines in a way that they have not been since the 1980s and 1990s. Although the recent violence has raised public awareness of the Kurds in Iraqi Kurdistan, the area is no stranger to conflict. For over 50 years, this region has been the stage for battles between Kurdish forces and the Iraqi central government, as well as between various Kurdish political groups. Furthermore, Iraqi Kurdistan is home to a number of minority ethnic and religious groups whose own aspirations sometimes clash with those of the Kurdish majority. After Operation Desert Storm, the Iraqi Kurds gained de facto autonomy, which was legally recognized in 2005. Thanks to the Peshmerga guarding the borders, the KRG experienced a period of stability and growth, while the rest of Iraq was racked by civil war. As you can imagine, the recent history of Iraqi Kurdistan has not been conducive to archaeological research. Both foreign and Iraqi archaeologists have rarely been able to work in the region for any length of time due to the instability and atmosphere of mistrust between the Kurds and the government. The recent stability and prosperity has brightened prospects for research considerably. In the last few years, international projects from the United States, Europe, and elsewhere have begun survey and excavation under the supervision and authority of the KRG's Directorate General of Antiquities. The preliminary results from these activities have already greatly improved our understanding of the history of human occupation in this area. The Rowanduz Archaeological Program, or RAP, is one of these research projects. RAP is under the general direction of Dr. Michael Dante of Boston University. Dr. Richard Zettler from Penn is the associate director, and I serve as one of the field directors. In my remaining time, I want to introduce you to what it is like to work in Iraqi Kurdistan, as well as discuss some of our preliminary findings. The Kurdish regional government consists of 3 provinces: Erbil, Duhok, and Sulaymaniyah. Most of the Kurds within the country live within these areas, although there are significant numbers that live in the surrounding provinces. The geography of the region varies dramatically. Erbil, the capital of the KRG, rests on the Erbil Plain at 1,300 feet above sea level. 70 miles to the northeast, the tops of the central chain of the Zagros Mountains, which serves as the border between Iraq and Iran, are around 10,000 feet. Recent archaeological research has been concentrated on the Erbil Plain, the Rania Plain, and the region around Sulaymaniyah, where another Kolb Junior Fellow, Steve Burnett, plans to continue excavations in the spring. In 2013, RAP received a 5-year permit from the KRG Directorate General of Antiquities to conduct survey and excavation in Soran district, a mountainous region in northeastern Erbil province. This area has received little previous archaeological attention. It is most famous for Ralph Selecki's work during the 1950s at Shanidar Cave, where the remains of Neanderthals were uncovered. More recently, Rainer Michael Boehmer conducted surface survey in the area around Sidakon, here, in October 1973. Unfortunately, he was only able to work for a week because the locals refused to sell him bread. Our own beginning was not without its difficulties. When we arrived in Erbil in May 2013, we were told to expect our permit imminently. This proved overly optimistic. We finally signed our permit to excavate at Girdi Dasht, a mound near Soran, in early July, after weeks of sitting in offices, drinking tea, and eating biscuits. Permit in hand, we took the road to Soran in order to begin our excavations. The road between Erbil and Soran provides an excellent opportunity to discuss the varied geography in this part of the country, as well as to explore the effects of the growing economy on the countryside. The road itself was originally built between 1928 and 1932 by A.M. Hamilton, a New Zealand-born civil engineer who was charged with the construction of the road by the British. Hamilton had no easy task. Although Erbil and Soran are only 43 miles apart as the crow flies, the terrain between them consists of a series of intermontane valleys and, most dauntingly, the Rowanduz Gorge, a narrow canyon with 1,600-foot high sides that one must pass through to reach Soran and Rowanduz. With all of the ups and downs and twists and turns, the modern drive takes about 2 hours. However, this should soon be faster, since the KRG is nearing completion of one tunnel, and another is planned. So this is the one that's almost done, and our drivers decided it was good enough because on our way out of the country, we went through it. As you can see, they had to flatten down the piles of dirt, and it does come out the other side. So, all of this infrastructure work is matched by a construction boom that is visible in the towns along the road. In the last decade, the Kurdish economy has been buoyed by growing energy and tourism sectors. The tourism industry is particularly evident in the foothills. Places like Shaklawa and Rowanduz have become popular destinations for tourists from southern Iraq and the Gulf states. The result is an explosion of new hotels, restaurants, and rental properties that are in varying stages of completion. This recent surge in public and private construction threatens the region's cultural heritage. The KRG has a law that requires archaeological discoveries to be reported to the Department of Antiquities and for construction to stop until archaeologists can assess the situation. However, these rules are not always followed. Further, the Department of Antiquities in Soran District does not have enough staff to keep up with demand, which brings us back to RAP and our summer activities. RAP's work can be divided into two categories: excavations at Girdi Dasht and rescue excavations at the request of Abdulwahab Suleiman, the Director of Antiquities for Soran District. Girdi Dasht, located on the Soran Plain near the Balakian River, consists of both a 1.6-hectare high mound and a low mound of at least 1.25 hectares. The morphology of the high mound, which rises to 20 meters above the surrounding plain, strongly suggests that Girdi Dasht was fortified in one or more periods. There's clear evidence for a wall running around the upper edge of the mound, as well as a gateway. Further, the site is well situated to observe and control movement to and from the Rowanduz Gorge, which one element opens here coming towards Soran, as well as traffic heading to and from the Mujesser-Sidikan area, heading this way and then up into the mountains to Sidikan. Girdi Dasht is the largest site on the plain and, minimally, has evidence for 2nd and 1st millennium BCE, as well as Islamic period occupation. Since no archaeological sequences exist for the proto-historic and historic periods in the Rowanduz-Soran region, Girdi Dasht was chosen for excavation in order to facilitate the development of a regional chronology. In 2013, we opened 2 soundings, which were expanded in 2014. Operation 1 along the east side of the high mound, and Operation 2 at its base, in roughly the same area, up 1 to up 2. The earliest material, work in Operation 1 uncovered a series of fortifications. The earliest material is early Iron Age, with middle and late Islamic strata above. Most recent of all are the remains of a latrine and Czechoslovakian razors that likely date from when the top of the site was used as an anti-aircraft position during the Iran-Iraq War. In Operation 2, excavation in 2013 revealed a mud brick wall in association with plain and painted Khaborware ceramics of the Middle Bronze Age, 2000 to 1600 BCE. Additional work this summer exposed more of this wall and recovered mixed deposits beneath it that likely date to the late 3rd millennium, but we need more time to analyze that pottery. In addition to excavation, a geomagnetic survey crew from Ludwig Maximilians Universität, headed by Dr. Jörg Fassbinder, mapped large sections of the low mound, documenting extensive settlement. Based on surface collection, these remains likely date to the Middle Bronze Age and Islamic periods. Alongside our work at Girdi Dasht, we conduct rescue excavations and site assessments with the Sauron Department of Antiquities. These past 2 seasons, work has been concentrated on sites around Sauron and sites near Sidikhan. Sauron is here, Sidikhan here, close to the border with Iran. This year, we spent 2 weeks at Bonahilk, on the northwest edge of Sauron. This site was first excavated by Patty Jo Watson in 1954 as part of the Iraq Jarmo project. Over 10 days, she recovered abundant evidence of the Halof period. Dating to the 6th millennium BCE, this period is well known for its elaborately decorated pottery. Since the 1950s, homes have spread over much of the site, which resulted in leveling by bulldozers. This summer, we conducted a sounding to see if any of the site was still preserved beneath the homes. What we found, as you can see over here, was around 1.5 meters of trash deposit on the northern side of the mound, which fits well with Watson's own work and discoveries in this area. Although the pottery was beautiful, the most interesting find for me personally was actually the remains of a horn from an aurochs, a type of wild cattle that is the ancestor of domestic cattle, down here. And here's an example of what this pottery looks like. This is a plate from Watson's volume, but the pottery we found was very similar, again, not surprisingly. After Bonahilk, the rest of my summer was spent in Sidikhan. Due to the IS advance, the residents at this time were plagued by long lines of vehicles waiting for rationed gasoline and intermittent shelling by Iranian artillery along the border. So it was an interesting time to be there. Sidikhan is best described as a farm town. It has one major road through its center where all of the shops are located, and the streets are packed in the evening with shoppers. All of this congestion is exacerbated by the intensive road construction, which begins to the west of town and extends all the way to the Iranian border at Kelishin, more than 15 miles away. The road construction is the reason why we're here. Last year, during our last scheduled week in Iraq, Mr. Abdulwahab Suleiman contacted RAP about archaeological remains that had been encountered during road widening activities along the Topzawa Chai near Sidikhan. Upon visiting the area, we found that multiple ancient settlements and cemeteries had been damaged. More importantly, a pre-Islamic tomb, equally importantly, a pre-Islamic tomb had been torn open, causing bones and pottery to spill into the road cut. Mr. Suleiman asked RAP to conduct emergency excavations on this tomb, as well as any other remains that needed immediate attention. Two locations were identified for salvage work, here at Gundi Topzawa and then Gabristani Topzawa. And this is just for in discussing Gabristani Topzawa and Gundi Topzawa, if you were not aware of the Iron Age chronology, and for many there's probably no reason for you to be so, here's the time period we're talking about. So Gabristani Topzawa is a stone-built tomb that was terraced into the hillside. Its dimensions are roughly square, 2.2 meters north-south, 2.25 meters east-west, and around 1.85 meters in height. The entrance to the tomb was on its southern side, but that was partially torn out by the construction equipment. However, the tomb had not remained sealed in antiquity. At some point, the tomb blocking either collapsed inwards or was pushed in, crushing many of the bones, ceramics, and other artifacts within. There are 2 periods of use in this tomb, an earlier primary occupation and a secondary reuse. We identified 6 distinct skulls in the primary level, but there were likely more individuals. As far as we can tell, the bodies were placed in the middle of the tomb during burial, while earlier interments were moved to the sides. There were at least 3 individuals along the east wall of the tomb, whose long bones appear to have been intentionally stacked with their skulls. Ceramic vessels were found in close association with these stacks. Further, the remains of sheep, goat, cattle, and at least 2 dogs were recovered nearby. The artifacts from this level include copper bronze jewelry, most notably a snake-headed bracelet seen here, stone beads, and abundant pottery. Ceramics consisted of a wide range of utilitarian and fine wares. The pottery and other artifacts are most similar to Achaemenid comparanda. A C14 sample from the earliest excavated surface gave a date range of 359 to 89 BCE, suggesting a late Achaemenid or post-Achaemenid date. However, the lack of Hellenistic and Parthian-related material suggests that it's closer to late Achaemenid. For an unknown length of time, the tomb filled with about half a meter of fluvial and Aeolian deposits. Then the tomb was reused. At this point, there was a limited amount of space. So the bodies from this second period appear to have been interned in the tomb sitting upright against the west wall facing towards the east. See, legs extended here, and then skulls and actually much of the ribs and other upper body. So it seems like they were probably slumped in there, and then the upper body came down here, and then the legs were coming out. 4 bodies were excavated in situ. There were no grave goods found with these bodies, so we're uncertain about their date. We were only briefly able to visit Gundi Tabzawa in 2013. The road widening activities had cut a 133-meter section through the site. From what we could see, there were a series of buildings that had been heavily burned, and some of the walls were preserved as high as 4 meters. The pottery collected from the section suggested an early Iron Age date. This dating was supported by 3 C14 samples taken from burned beams in 2 different rooms. These dates provided ranges of 1188 to 904 BCE, 996 to 817, and 804 to 519 BCE. This year, we returned to excavate some of these rooms. Work focused on the western and far eastern sides of the site. In both areas, excavation revealed multiple stages of well-preserved masonry buildings terraced into a hillside overlooking the Topsawa Valley and river below. In the west, our work focused on the lowest terrace of this building complex, where we uncovered the remains of kitchens and storage areas. The main level, which was burned, is Iron 3, based on the ceramics. The site has earlier material below the main floor level, which dates to Iron 2, if not later Iron 1. Sunk into the top of these remains is at least 1 Achaemenid burial. In this area, we were able to trace the foundations of the walls out into the road. They did not extend very far before making a corner, which suggests that only the very edge of the site was disturbed. I just want to draw attention to the fibula here and the bracelet over here. And this was a grave of a woman, and you cannot see it in this picture, but there were actually a crazy, and I use this intentionally, a crazy amount of beads. Little stone beads. She seemed to have had some type of beaded garment, and just every time you moved any dirt, there were more beads. And ultimately, we just had to kind of scoop them up into containers and sift it later, because it was taking so long. To the east, the excavated remains are likely later. They may well be a later Iron 3, Iron 4 habitation area. Notably, these 2 occupation areas are separated by empty space in the section. The Achaemenid burial to the west may correspond to this occupation. In both areas, the bottoms of the next level of terraced architecture are visible. So, in addition to Gundi Topsawa, our surveys along the Topsawa Chai have identified other sites that were similarly destroyed in Iron 3. These discoveries raise the question of whether there are material evidence of Sargon II's invasion of Musatsir. The kingdom of Musatsir was a buffer state between the empires of Assyria and Urartu during the early 1st millennium BCE. Despite its neighbors' political designs, Musatsir maintained relative independence until the 8th century BCE. In part, the region's natural fortifications deterred invasion, but Musatsir probably relied on divine protection as well. Musatsir was home to the main temple of the god Haldi. The temple served as a trans-regional cult center, bestowing status and wealth on the little kingdom. In 714 BCE, diplomacy failed. The Neo-Assyrian king, Sargon II, conquered Musatsir and sacked the Haldi temple at the end of his famous 8th campaign. The prevalent interpretation is that he came down from the Kelishin Pass, down along the Topzawa, and into Sidikon, sacking large numbers of settlements and the temple. Sargon commemorated this achievement in pictures and text on stone bas-reliefs found in his palace at Khorsabad, and in a cuneiform text that enumerates the astounding wealth his soldiers looted from the temple and the kingdom. The Assyrians forcibly resettled large numbers of Musatsir's inhabitants elsewhere and incorporated the region into their empire. The most compelling evidence that the Rapsteady area was Musatsir comes from 2 stone stelae erected by Urartian kings at the high mountain pass of Kelishin and near the modern village and stream bearing the name Topzawa. The stelae presumably lay along an ancient route linking Urartu to Assyria via Musatsir, and both inscriptions are concerned with the kingdom of Musatsir and its ruler, King Orzana. In the early 1970s, a German team led by Rainer Michael Bohmer conducted a few days of important preliminary research revealing early Iron Age occupation centered in modern Sidikon. Bohmer even found stone column bases in the little hamlet of Mugesser, hinting at an early Iron Age temple lay beneath its agricultural fields and orchards. And in 2012, Dr. Zettler and Dr. Dante went back and found similar materials in this area. This year, Jörg Fassbender's geomagnetic survey team likewise produced tantalizing results. At the hilltop early Iron Age fortress of Kalat Mugesser, their mapping produced detailed plans of the underlying buildings. Even more exciting, in the village of Mugesser, the geomagnetic surveys produced signs of a monumental structure in the area where Bohmer and other archaeologists have tentatively located the Haldi temple. So this, as it says down here, it's obviously not the geomagnetic stuff, but this is a plan done by Bohmer and Fenner when they were there in '73. We went back last year and couldn't see as much, but you could still kind of pick out the stone walls of this here. So, next year, we hope to focus our work on Sidikon and its surroundings. We will continue excavating at Gundi Topzawa in order to explore the next level of the terraced architecture. We also plan to begin excavations in the area of the monumental structure at Mugesser, as well as conduct soundings to test the geomagnetic results at Kalat Mugesser. Whether this is the Haldi temple or not, we seem close to pinpointing the elusive kingdom of Musatsir. Thank you.